Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears up to some of the travails and tribulations that take place throughout our cities, our states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And for those of you who follow me or are new to my channel, I've done several videos on the inhumane and unconstitutional violations that have taken place in many of our city and county jails and even our prisons. I've done videos on the Mississippi prison system, the Alabama prison system and its inhumane conditions of prisoners, the state of California. There have been at least a dozen deaths in the St. Louis City Jail in the last 2 years. There have been in Fulton County, in Atlanta, Georgia, there have been over a dozen suspicious deaths in their county jail. And what is going on with our jail and our prison system and the inhumane conditions and the civil rights violations that are being enacted on our prisoners. Yes, many of these individuals have committed crimes, but they're still human beings. And for young people or individuals who are out here committing crimes, you think there's chaos and disruption going on throughout our cities. The last place you want to end up is in our United States penal system. If you think that there are all kinds of craziness going on in our cities and states, there is even more craziness going on inside our prison system. And this one I got for you is straight out of Virginia, which is close to Washington, D.C., where our U.S. government is, and right under their nose, there are a number of allegations and things taking place where allegedly prisoners are burning themselves because they want to be removed from this prison called Red Onion State Prison. And there's been allegations of at least 6 to a dozen inmates who have set themselves on fire in order to bring attention and to get removed from this Red Onion State Prison. So let's get into it and see what's going on here. Inmates burn themselves in protest at Inhumane Virginia State Prison and its inhumane conditions. Officials acknowledge prisoners have harmed themselves, but say that they did not set themselves on fire or self-immolate. Several incarcerated people in Virginia's high-security Red Onion State Prison have intentionally burned themselves in a protest against harsh conditions at the facility. A written statement from Virginia's Department of Corrections acknowledges that men in prison there had harmed themselves, although the authorities confirmed 6 incidents, while others reported that 12 men were injured. In recent months, 6 inmates at Red Onion State Prison have burned themselves using improvised devices that were created by tampering with electrical outlets. The director of Virginia's Department of Corrections, Chad Dotson, said in a written statement. So he is the director of the Virginia Department of Corrections. So you're going to hear his name throughout this article, Mr. Dotson, Chad Dotson. Earlier this week, Virginia's Governor, Glenn Youngkin, also confirmed the protest and said there was an investigation into the injuries. I don't think that part of the investigation is, I do think that part of the investigation is to understand how they've happened and why they've happened, Youngkin said, Governor Youngkin. We have been in conversations with the Department of Corrections about these circumstances. Dotson, remember, he is the director of Virginia Department of Corrections. Dotson added that some of those injured were treated for burns at the Corrections Department's secure medical facility, while others did not require outside medical treatment. All 6 were referred to mental health staff for treatment, according to Dotson. In his statement, he also said, to be clear, These inmates did not set themselves on fire or self-emulate, as some reports have ludicrously suggested. Dotson also said the recent round of stories about Red Onion State Prison are nothing more than bad faith efforts to try to score cheap political points by advocacy groups who pursue prison abolition and policies that would make Virginians less safe. Dotson's announcement comes after reporting from the incarcerated journalist Kevin Rashid Johnson, who first drew attention to self-harm at the state facility in October through his work on Prison Radio, a nonprofit activist organization. Johnson reported that he had met an individual in September named Inhumane, who claimed to have returned from the hospital the day before after being treated for self-inflicted burns. On Prison Radio, Johnson said Ishit had told him that the racism and abuses, the hard and inhumane conditions at Red Onion were so intolerable that he and others were setting themselves on fire in desperate attempts to be transferred away from this prison. About a week later, Prison Radio also released an audio recording from Ikan Ishiat himself, in which Ishiat talked about how he had started a hunger strike since returning from being treated for his burns. He said he was protesting discrimination, which he says he has to deal with every day at Red Onion State Prison. He says, "I'm going about this the right way, I guess. Like with the hunger strike," Ishiat said. "But if I have to, I don't mind setting myself on fire again. This time I will set my whole body on fire before I have to stay up here and do the rest of my time up here. I would rather die before I stay up here. Because every day I'm dealing with discrimination, whether it's behind my race, my last name, and or my religion." According to reporting from Al Jazeera, Johnson, the incarcerated journalist, was put in solitary confinement in early November, shortly after he first drew attention to the self-harm. Noelle Hanrahan, the founder of Prison Radio, said in an interview that she had spoken with Johnson's attorney and been told that Johnson had been placed in solitary confinement. Johnson's initial reporting on Prison Radio mentioned he had heard of 12 men at Red Onion State Prison who had burned themselves, but Dotson has only acknowledged 6. Whether it's 6 or 12, what difference does it make? One is one too many. "We are confident on the basis of this story, the numbers are still drilling down," Hanrahan said. The Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, VLBC, a group of lawmakers, released a statement on X condemning the conditions at Red Onion. The Virginia Legislative Black Caucus is horrified at recent reports of incarcerated individuals setting themselves on fire in response to the degrading and inhumane conditions at Red Onion State Supermax Prison in Wise County, Virginia. The group wrote in its statement, "These acts of self-immolation are desperate cries for help." The caucus claimed in its statement, people who have been incarcerated at Red Onion State Prison described being regularly subjected to racial and physical abuse from correctional officers, medical neglect, including the withholding of medicine, excessive stays in solitary confinement with one report of excessive stays in solitary confinement, with one report of one person being in there 600 consecutive days. They also talk about inedible food, having been covered in maggots and officers' spit, and violent dog attacks. The group of lawmakers said at least 12 black men had burned themselves in protest. A report from more than 20 years ago from Human Rights Watch said Red Onion raises serious human rights concerns. In a written statement sent to The Guardian in response to the 6 burnings, The Virginia State Senator Barbara Favela said that the Department of Corrections must operate our prisons in a safe, humane, and rehabilitative manner. Well, they can take the rehabilitative part out of it because there is no rehabilitation in prison. That is a falsehood and a fallacy. I encourage the governor to order an independent investigation of these allegations, Favela said. In his statement, Dotson said that on numerous occasions, the Department of Corrections has invited all legislators to visit Red Onion State Prison. We have in particular sent personal invitations to every member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus in response to their statement, Dotson said. Miriam Nemeth, deputy litigation attorney at the Washington, D.C.-based advocacy group Rights Behind Bars, has been representing Johnson, who first wrote about the protests from prison. And she also told The Guardian that he has been put in solitary confinement since November 4th. She accused the prison of enacting unending retaliation against Johnson for his efforts to speak out. Attorney Nemeth said she was not currently able to speak to Mr. Johnson, and she had been told by authorities that he had been put in isolation for his own safety after a threat against him. Yeah, right. The Guardian requested comment from the Virginia Department of Corrections on this aspect of Johnson's situation, but did not receive a response prior to this publication. What in God's green earth is going on in our state, federal, local jails, county jails, and our prison systems? There have been innumerable amounts of stories. We always hear the gossip and the rumor on the streets about the inhumane conditions of our U.S. prison systems throughout the years. But to have real live stories of these allegations, as I said, I've talked about Mississippi, state prisons, Alabama state prisons, California, locally, the city jail in St. Louis has had at least a dozen suspicious deaths in the last year and a half under the city, St. Louis City local politics watch. Fulton County has had over a dozen suspicious deaths in Fulton County, Georgia, in the outskirts in the surrounding area of Atlanta. This should be a story that should appeal to your heart. We all have had or have known either a family member or someone who has ended up in jail or in prison. We do know that there's no form of rehabilitation, but there should be some sense of humanity and safety, public safety. The same way we worry about public safety throughout our cities and our states, there should be a public safety issue, or public safety should be at the top of our concerns, even in our jail and prison systems. We know there are understaffing of correctional officers. That creates a public safety for the people that work there. And of course, there's a public safety issue for the inmates. And on top of that, for them to be treated with inhumane circumstances is unfortunate and is not acceptable. Tell me what you think about this allegation at Red Onion, Virginia State Prison, and the inhumane conditions there.